And we're going to go live. So, ladies and gentlemen, just like that, as you might have seen me just close out one show, I didn't even get a chance to do a wardrobe change. I'm back with the second hour of Impacting Life 24/7 with your host, CL King. I'm sitting high atop the Ruth E. Plowden Legacy Chair here in Impactville, and I am beyond ecstatic for my next guest, just like we were for Dr. Dunlap. These two pastors have been on the show now. This might be their third time, second or third time. And they are truly, I can't find the right adjectives to describe these people, because here's what I want you to understand. Oftentimes we hear about faith, and faith without works is dead. And so these two, this amazing couple who is building the church in New Orleans called Noah, New Orleans Apostolic Haven, they are building an amazing church where it's coupled with faith and works. But the faith component literally blows this country away. When they post on their page, we are sometimes like, no, that can't be for real. Y'all, are you serious? And every time I get to feeling like kind of in my feelings, every time I get to feeling low, every time I feel like, man, the world is against me, all I do is go to their page. and then my life is made different. And so I want to tell you guys about Pastors Phil and Jazzmine McKee. Of course, they are no strangers to Impacting Life 24/7. They're building a church in New Orleans, Louisiana, and they have been through some of the greatest highs and some of the lowest lows that any church builders could go through. And I have just been inspired. They've inspired an entire nation and generation with what God is doing there. They truly do live the walk of faith. And every time they come up to this thing called a roadblock, God somehow makes a way out of no way. So welcome to the High Definition Studios, my friends, Pastor Phillip and Jazzmine McKee. Welcome, pastors.
Hey, how are you?
Honored to be here.
Man, it's an honor to have you. And they're down there in the sweltering heat of New Orleans. Am I saying it right? How am I supposed to say it?
New Orleans.
New Orleans. Okay, I'll get it right. Maybe 4 more times on the show and I'll be saying it right. But these amazing people, I feel like I get an opportunity to share them with you all in Impactville. Of course, you guys know our show is downloaded in almost all 50 states. It's carried in 30-something countries and on 40 platforms. So I feel like this is like I get to do show and tell today, because these people are people of God, of faith, and they just absolutely wow me every time I see what God is doing in their life. And that is a good thing. But, you know, it shouldn't be that light is hid under a bushel, but they're letting their light shine. So without further ado, because we got to get right to it, I wanted to welcome both Pastor and Sister McKee and get everybody caught up on how you guys met, because they got an amazing family. Who's going to tell the story of how you guys got connected?
Well,
I'll do it. Okay.
It's an interesting story of how we met, to say the least.
Go ahead.
I was nowhere near a church. Didn't grow up under any kind of denomination, under any kind of faith, and so I grew up in South Jackson, Mississippi, and I grew up pretty rough, pretty hard. Was raised in in an environment that was not real conducive with serving God, to say the least. And as I got older, I fell into criminal activity, fell into selling drugs, doing drugs, became an alcoholic, was involved with nefarious crimes here and there, and just lived the street life, and was a gangbanger, all that foolishness. I was involved in all of it. And I met my wife. I was 20 years old when I met her. And she, when I met her, I had the most vile ill intentions of just using her and whatever. And but she changed my life. She had stepped away from God for a little while. And when I met her, she was nowhere near God. No. She was raised in the apostolic church. But as life happens, sometimes she left the church, and I won't tell her testimony. And so we met, and the first time I ever went to church, it was just after Easter Sunday. And I looked at her and I said, we had been together for a couple weeks. And I looked at her and I said, should we have gone to church on Easter? And that was a very strange concept even for me to say, because I didn't go to church at all on Easter Sunday growing up. I didn't go to any church anytime ever growing up. And so for me to say that, I look back at it now, and it had to have been the Lord using me in that moment when I didn't even know who the Lord was. Right. And so she said, well, I mean, yeah, we can go to a church if you want to. And I quickly responded, and I said, well, wherever we go, they got to have good music. Mm-hmm. And she said, well, Pentecostal churches have good music. Sometimes. And I was like, okay, that's fine. I didn't know what Pentecost was. I had never heard of it before. And so I stepped into this church in Jackson, Mississippi, and it's a big church. And there's about 1,000 people there. And I looked like, if you can imagine for a second, close your eyes and imagine a hood rat, just street thug. That's exactly what I was. Whatever you just imagined was me. Yeah. And so I walk into the back of this church, not knowing anybody, not knowing anything about God. Right. And I sit in the back row. He had braids. I had braids. I had a beard. Yeah. He had braids. I'll text you a picture of me.
Yeah, I got to have a picture of that, bro. I just
had the big rope chain. Yeah, man. And so when I stepped into the church, I was completely out of my comfort zone. Everybody was dressed right. Everybody was clean shaved. They were talking to each other, and I didn't know what was going on. Then as the preaching began and everybody's worshiping during worship service, and the guy next to me has his hands up praising God, and I high-fived him because I just didn't know any better. Mm-hmm. I really did that. and everybody's speaking in tongues, and I look at my then girlfriend and I said, what are they saying? Do they all know the same language? What is that? Is that Hebrew? Is that Hebrew? What is this? And but what I felt there was something different that I never felt before. And once the altar call began and everybody began to flood the altar, I decided everybody else is doing it. I'm just going to do it too and see what's going on. I want to experience what they're experiencing, because I had felt this presence that I never felt before. Now I know it was the presence of God. Right. But I went to the altar that day, and 2 brothers were there to meet me at the altar, unknowing to me. And as I just stood there, they began to instruct me of how to pray and how to repent. And as I was real hesitant at first, because, I got to watch my back at all times.
Right.
And they began to pray with me. And as I lifted up my hands and I just began to repent for the life that I had lived up to that point, the Lord filled me with the Holy Ghost. And, I had the evidence of speaking with other tongues. And that same day, I went and got baptized in Jesus' name. They asked me if I've been baptized, and I was like, nope, don't know what that is. And
we're about to drown you.
Right. Well, I tell folks at Noah, we're going to hold you under till the bubble stop.
Oh.
And
he's just playing with them. But
I told one lady recently, I said, once you get down there, now I want you to take a big breath when you're underwater, so that the Lord will fill your lungs with his holy water. Uh-oh. And if it wasn't for my wife, she probably would have did it. But nevertheless, my life was changed in that very moment. I had no more tendencies and no more urges for drugs and alcohol. And I immediately left, and I cut all my hair off, shaved my face. And I didn't want to be that person that I used to be.
Right.
And I'm gonna let her speak.
Well,
So
let me interject here because I wanna make sure I have to put this caveat in here because these are both preachers, right? So if I get a word
Yep.
in edgewise tonight, it will be a miracle because now you got three preachers. We just had a preacher before, Dr. Dunlap. I'm just like I ain't gonna get to talk on the show tonight. But the truth of the matter is that uh, God can do anything with anybody.
Right.
And
Right.
right.
we don't know who may listen to this show later on who feels like who may have a similar story like you, Pastor Phil, that
Yeah.
I don't darken the doors of any type of church and
Right.
God wouldn't accept me. Well, there's a lot of people that may not go just because they feel like, well, the religion won't accept me or God
Right.
won't. But you're a true testimony, brother, that God
Yeah.
can transform humanity regardless of where we've been. Jazzmine, tell us a little of your story since you get the same
No,
amount of time as he did, okay?
no, okay. No, so when I was raised in Pentecost, I say I wasn't born in Pentecost. I came to Pentecost about 4 or 5 years old, right at that break. Really long story short, I came from a broken home. I was adopted. I'd love to tell you that my adoption story was what some of these beautiful stories we hear on social media these days are, but it wasn't. It was a difficult experience. From 5 to 15, although I was apostolic, I was abused in an apostolic church, and God kept His hand on me because a lot of people that go through that amount of abuse lose their minds, go crazy, can't hold their own. But God, I asked God one day, where was He in the midst of that? This was more recent. But the Lord spoke to me and He said, I was right there. And he gave me a vision of Him holding my mind, like His hands just wrapped around my mind. And so I know that God was there through those years. That is ultimately why I backslid. Backslid at 16, started living the street life, just everywhere, prostitution, drugs, if you name it, I've been there. Then I decided I'd try to get cleaned up, go on the, I decided I was going to try to run from God. That was my whole idea. I'm going to run from God.
Ooh.
And it doesn't make any sense, but that was my mind then.
Right.
And so I decided I'd go in the military because,
This guy's not a military, right?
it's funny to say it now, but I thought I had a plan. And I got there and I did well, and then I was abused in the military. And it was at that point that God was able to speak to me for just to get on my level. He spoke to me in that moment when I woke up from that experience. God spoke to me and He said, I reign on the just and the unjust the same. The only difference is my hand. And so I realized then that while I was traumatized as a child and then as an adult, God kept me, whether I realized it or not.
Yeah.
At that point, I was angry with God because I didn't have that vision at that point to see where God was holding my mind together. But I had it then. By the time I met Him, I was still into craziness. I was still in the military. But God, in His grace and His mercy, we did get together. He did ask that question. I responded. Ironically, somebody in Target invited me to church, and it angered me.
Yeah.
And so God was already working on me without Him even knowing. And so that's how I knew where a local church was, because I wasn't from the Jackson area.
Right.
I was on duty and stuff. And so with that being said, God was able to move in that even. And so that's how we ended up at that church. And He got the Holy Ghost and I got angry. We had a huge fight on the way back to the house.
What'd you
that
get
night
mad about? What were you angry about?
because I didn't want to be Pentecostal.
Oh,
I thought church, I was good with just going to church.
Mhm.
Everybody knows there's the Easter, Christmas, Mother's Day saints.
Yep.
And I was good with just doing that. And I didn't want to give up my lifestyle. And more importantly, I didn't want to be hurt again.
yeah.
And it was a big eruption. And I said, it's fine. You can live for God and I'm not. I've seen couples where one spouse lives for God and one doesn't. We can do just fine. And so he said, okay.
Yep.
And once he understood why I left, he just backed off. And I think that was God's grace in that moment, because I think pushing on somebody that's truly been hurt without allowing God to work on them can be catastrophic.
Right. Does more damage.
And so God allowed it to work that way. He went to church. I'd go sometimes, I'd not, and then about 6 weeks later, God refilled me with the Holy Ghost.
Yeah.
You just said something, Pastor Jazzmine McKee. My staff told me I was saying y'all name wrong. They're family. I can call them whatever I want to call them. You just said something that is really powerful, and I hope people who are in the faith community will listen to this. Is that
having a camera?
It's all good. Pastor Phil and God Himself gave space, right?
Yes.
And that's an important thing. We talk about this. We've talked before. Even in Pentecost, sometimes we are looking at everything immediate and bam, 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 and yada yada yada. But the truth of the matter is that you needed that space to come to God.
Heal.
Right. You needed that as, hey, look, I'm broken, and I got
Right.
broken in the church, the
Right.
place that's supposed to be the place of healing. And so
Right.
it's so amazing. This is how we know this is God, because here's your gangbanger boyfriend and husband. don't even fat meets greasy, but he recognizes that, hey, look, I'm going to work on me and let God be God. And that's a beautiful story. For those of you who are just tuning in and listening to our podcast, we have pastors Phillip and Jazzmine McKee here from the church that they're pastoring in New Orleans. It's called New Orleans Apostolic Haven, and their church has been built off of faith, works, and miracles. And so one of the things that I would like to start with is, I know, Pastor, and we'll have you guys back on a million more times, but I know you were an evangelist when you went into the ministry, and you guys were traveling around, and God called you all to New Orleans. Is that how that went?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
So we were we've kind of done it all in the world of ministry.
Except for youth pastor.
Yeah, we were never youth pastors, but nevertheless, and we're pastors in our youth though.
Right.
So, in 2012, God called me. Actually, it was 2009 when I knew I would be involved in ministry. And my pastor at the time, I would tell him, I feel the call to preach. I'm feeling this, and all he would ever tell me was, pray and read your Bible. And so that's kind of what I went off of. And
sorry.
There we go.
It's all good.
I was kind of upset because I felt like he didn't take me serious. And so I just kind of backed off from the calling. And in 2012, I was at a conference in Oklahoma, a church conference. We were there helping the youth pastor out, and she's fixing to cry with me. And this brother got up and he started preaching, and he started giving his testimony. And his name is Ari Prado. He's from Southern California. And as he was giving his testimony, I was just standing there in shock because it was my testimony. And it was everything that I went through as a kid, my life growing up, it was the same testimony. Mm-hmm. And up until that point, I was under the impression that there's no ministry for me because of my past, because of how I grew up. I would only see these well-established ministers on the platform who their uncle's Moses and their stepdaddy was Jesus, and so I thought, well, I don't have a pedigree, so there's no way I can be involved in ministry. And then that brother got up and he started preaching and gave his testimony, and it changed my life. And I hit my face in that moment. I hit my face on the carpet, And the Lord spoke to me and he said, I'm calling you to missions work. I'm calling you to ministry. And so my immediate thought was, global missions or, being a missionary. So we started pursuing missionary work. Ended up doing, long story short, ended up being missionaries to Puerto Rico for a little while, independent missionaries.
Right.
And then from there, we went into evangelism and evangelized 4 years, nonstop, been through 43 states and
Canada.
up into Canada. And in Connecticut, sitting in the office of the
Yes.
evangelist quarters, the Lord said, go home and start a church. And New Orleans always felt like home to me because we lived here before.
Right. We were married here. And
Yeah.
We had a lot of history here.
And so the Lord said, go home and start a church. And I thought, that ain't you, God. And I just kept studying. And then she burst through the door and said, did you just hear from the Lord? And I knew at that moment, God had spoken the same thing to her.
Right.
And I said, yeah. I hung my head low and I said, yeah. I figured I'd never be a pastor. That was kind of I'll never do that.
Right.
And but the Lord had other plans.
Well, let me ask you this. So go ahead, Jazzmine. I'm sorry, what?
Hear us?
What?
Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can still hear you. Yes.
Okay.
The neighbor started cutting.
I'm sorry.
Tell him to quit cutting his grass. Doesn't he know you're on Impacted Life 24/7? No, we hear you fine. So when you came to New Orleans and you came to pastor, you assumed this big 40,000 square foot facility and had full-time staff and a parsonage and everything, right?
That's 1,200 members.
No,
Yeah,
listen, I tell you, I will say this. God called us here. I'm gonna tell you quick, just a really short testimony. Novella Grace was 3 weeks old.
Yep.
And he put me on a plane in Boston and he said, go home and find a storefront. Since you know the city, I'm going to send you. And since Novella was little and I was nursing, I had sick her. So me and Novella came to New Orleans. And I said, he didn't know this. I said to the Lord, I said, I need to know when I get there that you've truly called us there. And we turned the radio on. It was Life Songs 89.1.
Mm-hmm.
And they have at the 7 o'clock hour, they have like preacher that preaches. I forget his name now. And he was preaching about Nehemiah. And when God called him to go and rebuild the wall. And I put my head on the steering wheel and I just started crying because I knew that was God in that moment trying to tell me, hey, I know you're here and I know you need this word from me. And if you come, this is what I'm going to do for you.
Well, that's powerful.
And so if you look at the story, I didn't realize it then, but I realized it now looking back. Nehemiah had everything he needed. But one thing that was important is while he built the wall physically, he had to fight with the sword.
Mm-hmm.
And so you build and you fight. And you build and you fight. And so that is why we go through the struggle we go through, is because we're building the church, but we also have to war with the spirit.
Yeah.
This ground is not going to be given up easy.
It's not going to be given up
easy.
And ladies and gentlemen, like I said, I'm joined by pastors Phillip and Jazzmine McKee from New Orleans Apostolic Haven. They are building a phenomenal church there, but it didn't start out like that. So where did you have your first service?
We had our first service. Well, we had our first service in our living room.
Right.
That was our first Bible study with my family and one neighbor that was across the street.
Right.
She came. And then COVID hit and shut everything down. But we didn't stop. We just kept rolling with it.
Before that, our first Sunday service.
That's right. It was before COVID.
We had been having midweek services
at the house.
Yeah.
So
and then
we were doing it in your home.
We were supposed to rent a 7-day Adventist church. It's a long story. And then the night before our launch for Sunday services, we'd already been having church before then, but for the Sunday services, they pulled out. And
they said they didn't want you to
have it. We went
to
God and we said,
Yeah,
Mm-mm.
the night before.
The night before. So we stood on the side of St. Claude and we just prayed. We said, God, what do you want us to do? He said, I never told you to get a building.
Yeah.
And so we went into an old Walgreens parking lot that was across the street from that church.
Right. A vacant Walgreens parking lot.
And we had church.
We had a microphone attached to a speaker, and we had church.
We had church. Yes.
A microphone attached to
know,
the speaker. You had church in the parking lot?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
It was an old vacant
So
Walgreens building.
from that one church service in the parking lot, we kind of hopped around a little bit in different parking lots.
Yeah.
So and then we finally landed on the property that we now own.
Yeah.
And we put a tent up. And so we were
Right, but
outside having church for a couple years.
But don't tell. Let me unpeel this. Don't tell it all, Pastor, because
All right.
you went to several parking lots. Then you came to the place where your church is currently located, but you weren't having church there. You were having church outside, right?
Yeah.
And it's actually a vacant lot that's across the street from the church.
Right.
And it's a big square. And the city of New Orleans, before we got the property, I wanted it. I saw it and I said, I got to have that property. It's perfect to build a church on. But there was a church right next door. So I'm like, maybe. And so the city of New Orleans actually gave us that property free and clear. We would cut the grass on the property and pray while we're cutting the grass.
We would cut in
faith.
Yeah.
We will cut in faith and say, Lord, this is mine. I'm taking care of it. This is my property. I own it. You're going to give it to me. And we would cut the grass once a week. We bring the kids out there to play on it. And we're talking about this property. I think it's 100 by 200, big piece of property. And we would push it with a mower. And we would, at one point in time, I was attacked in my body the morning we were supposed to go cut the grass. And I was attacked in my body with vertigo.
Vertigo, yeah.
And I felt like I was dying. And I said, I have to go there. I don't care what I have to do. And my wife, I could barely stand up. I don't know if anybody's had a vertigo attack or not, but I could barely stand up. And I kind of limped out of the truck and dragged my feet to the mower. And my wife was walking with me with her hands under my arms, holding me up.
Because he wouldn't
while
let me
we
do
were
it.
praying.
He said, I have to do this. I have to do this.
And we would drop oil behind us and anoint the property. And then the city of New Orleans gave it to us.
So now let me make sure we clarify this. So you were mowing the lawn where the current building is now, or the lot across the street?
Property door.
The tent property.
It's right next door to the property.
Okay,
yeah.
Right. And so you wanted that property, or you wanted the property that the building's on?
Well, we wanted that property because it was big enough for us to put a tent on,
right,
and do what it do. And nobody could get a hold of the owners of the church building.
Right.
It took about a year before we were able to ever talk to the owner of the church.
So now tell us this, because you got to keep y'all moving. Tell us about having church in a tent for all those years. What was that like?
Oh, it was awesome. People are attracted to tents.
Actually, it really does work.
We had over 100 people under that tent at one point in time. And we would just go out there, and I'll tell you the routine. I would get there 30 minutes to an hour before service. I would pull a generator out. I'd set the speakers up. Me and my kids, we set the speakers up, put the microphones up, and the speakers were the first thing to be plugged into the generator.
Right.
Because I would get the music going, and I would turn it up real loud, some Marvin Sapp and Yolanda Adams, some music like that, and it would draw people out of their homes.
Yeah.
Because we're in the middle of a neighborhood. So it would draw them out of their house. And then they would come outside and see us setting chairs up, and we're praying loudly and not obnoxious, but people could tell we're praying.
Right.
And folks they're attracted to tents.
Yeah.
They'll drive by and say, tent revival. I'm like, yeah come on.
Exactly. And you you might can argue with the method, but you can't argue with the results. And I definitely agree with you. I've seen many tent revivals, very, very successful, but you guys started a church. So we got to progress here. We started hopping, we were parking lot hopping, and then and then we came to this lot, mowing it and believing in faith. The city gave it to you. Then you set up a tent.
Yeah.
And how long were you in the tent?
Oh, 2 years.
Yeah, we're probably in
2
10
years.
2 years.
And we
two
would.
2 years of ministering, preaching there on Sunday mornings, and it's
Yep.
not New Orleans is not necessarily Southern California. It gets pretty warm there, doesn't it?
It does. It's the humidity that we have to worry about. And so there would be times when it would rain and all of our equipment would get wet and everybody would huddle in the middle of the tent
Yes.
because it was raining so bad. But we just kept having church. We kept preaching. We kept singing. There would be times that our generator would stop working mid-service. One time our generator would not come on.
Yes. That
And
part.
so we literally pulled up our Yukon next to the
Yes.
tent, and it's got the Bluetooth sound system, whatever inside of it.
Yeah.
And so we opened the doors and Bluetooth the music to
There
the
you go.
car speakers, and we had worship service like that.
Yeah.
And I'm loud already, if you can't tell. And so
Yes.
I just microphone because we didn't have electricity that day.
Right.
So now let's remember the building the building you got that we saw dedicated. I got a picture of it here on the screen. For those of you wondering who I'm talking to pastors Phillip and Jazzmine McKee. They are the pastors of the New Orleans Apostolic Haven Church. God called them there some years ago, and they started the church in parking lots, having services in various parking lots, and then moved to a field and the tent. They were having a tent service on Sunday mornings. And now the building that we saw, that building was a blessing, but it was a lot of work, wasn't it?
It was a lot of work, to say the least. We bought a building that it was a Hurricane Katrina building. So it was in Katrina. It had 13 feet of water inside the building, and it was completely gutted when we bought the building.
Wow.
And the original owners, they wanted $100,000 for it, like it was. And so I refused that. I offered them $10,000. They refused that. So eventually, I hit them low, brother. So eventually,
Well, in fairness, the city had it appraised for that.
the city said it's only
So
worth
we
10 grand.
offered what the city said it was valued at,
Right.
just in fairness.
And so from that, about a year goes by and I keep a relationship with the pastor there. And we, in that time span, the Lord spoke to my wife and I and told them to offer $50,000, offer half of what they were asking for.
Right.
So we offered them 50 grand and we never heard back from the pastor. And a couple weeks later, I see his brother-in-law, and his brother-in-law tells me that he passed away and that him and his wife were assuming ownership of the property and that they accepted our offer, $50,000. And
So we started working to fix the building quick as we could.
Yeah.
And then Ida happens,
looking at him,
lifts up the back portion of like the
the
roof.
roof, right?
And I'm thinking, good Lord, we didn't have these problems. We had many problems. We didn't have that problem, Lord, before this happened. Like a long story short, we did work on it, but when Ida came, we lost everything.
Lost our home, everything.
Few people actually told us, it's okay if you don't go back. Everybody will understand. And all this, but the Lord said, no, I want you to go back. I want you to finish the work that I sent you to do.
Yep.
So we came back. Was homeless.
Almost for a year.
Literally,
1 year,
we were in hotels,
homeless with 7 kids.
Airbnbs. It was, listen, if we had an excuse to go, it would have been then.
Right.
And so, but we stayed, God honored it, kept having church under that tent. We started working on building again, had to clear out a lot of stuff that we had already fixed, but we cleared it out anyway and got started. And the the putback probably took what,
6, 8 months, 9 months
9
to
months,
build it back
10
up.
months.
Yeah.
And somewhere in the middle of all this, your tent blew away or something like that. Didn't your tent get
Yeah.
damaged?
So the first tent, so it survived 2 tornadoes,
Yes.
but all of a sudden a freak windstorm happens and
Yes.
destroys the tent.
Yeah.
Ironically, that was when we were purchasing another property.
Yeah, I
While we were,
remember.
it's like, okay,
Yep.
sometimes fate
So-
is petty.
And so we called the guy that we got the first tent from. And I said, hey man, we need another tent. This one got messed up. And he says, well, I got another one. It's a 20 by 30 and it was brand new. It was 20 by 40. So it was a little bigger than the one we had previously. I was okay, that's cool, man. Yeah, we'll take it because we can't have church and building yet. Wasn't nowhere near where we needed to be. And so he calls me and he says, yeah, I got this tent. You guys can use it for, I think it was like $300 a month. So it wasn't cheap, but it was a deal. He was cutting us a deal.
Right.
So we end up buying that tent from him.
Right.
And I acted in faith. I'm not gonna lie to you. We needed the tent. We couldn't keep renting it. We just wanted to own it. So I said, hey man, would you sell this tent to me? He says, I just spent $8,500 buying that tent. I mean, I would sell it, but I just spent $8,500 on it. I said, okay. I said, I'll give you $3,000 for it. And he said, I just spent $8,500 on it. I said, yeah, that's fine. I mean, I'll give you $3,000. and he said, I'll call you tomorrow. The next day he called me. He was like, I just bought this tent. I spent $8,000 on it. Yada, yada. I said, yeah, I know. But I mean, I got $3,000. I'll give it to you for this tent. And he said, you can have it for $3,000. So he sold me his brand new $8,000 tent that he just purchased. We might have been the first ones to ever rent it, but he sold it to us for $3,000.
That's
And so it's
amazing.
the favor of God.
That's the favor of God. Always, God is always seeming to operate right on time for y'all. You guys are family with the married with 8 children. Tell us the ages real quick for your phone dies.
So it's 14, 13, 10, 8, 6. Novella is 3, Nemo is 2, and then Tinny Faith is 3 months.
Tinny Faye is 3 months, and she got daddy wrapped around her finger, no doubt. So now we start working on the building. I remember they had to come redo the roof, and you had to do all that. And in terms of the blessings of God, God opened up some provisions to help with the cost of that, right?
Okay, he did. So we got a grant. We have not gotten all of the grant that we were originally supposed to get, but God can move on that situation. But God opened up the door for us to get that grant, and so we were able to get a lot of the work done at that cost. But we're believing God to finish the work that He started in that department, and then a lot of other things is project sponsors. So people will say, hey, I want to sponsor, like for instance, recently somebody sponsored the vanities and fixtures for the plumbing. And so since they donated the money to purchase the items, we purchased the items and we did the labor.
Yeah.
And so, God honors.
He did the labor.
Yeah, I was gonna say that because I just seen a post where Pastor Jazzmine was in there setting the toilet. I was like, where's Pastor Phil at? Oh, he was out doing
more.
Yep. I was
That
mowing the
is where
grass.
He said he would rather be outside than to be inside dealing with the plumbing. And so I agreed because it works. It really does work best that way.
Yeah, and you got your restrooms finished there. I seen, so that was an amazing miracle. And I want to show you guys something about the timing of the way things happen for Pastor Jazzmine and Phil McKee of New Orleans Apostolic Haven. You were looking for a home, and you talked about that you guys were kind of homeless and bouncing around, living in. I remember you living in Airbnbs and all that.
Yeah.
And so you found a home, and it was a home that could fit all of you in there, because I know we got a big family too, so you got to have some square footage. You can't do a single wide, really.
Right.
And so you got into this house, but just recently you got some news that the owner wanted to sell it, right?
So they actually was on the news not them, but the situation was on the news.
Mm-hmm.
Flood insurance has skyrocketed across our parishes, not just Orleans, but Orleans, Jefferson, St. Bernard. And homeownership insurance, the homeowners insurance skyrocketed. And then the taxes, we looked up the taxes last night when we were looking it up for this home, and the taxes for that house also went way high.
Mm-hmm.
It tripled. And so they literally are in a financial bind, bless their hearts, because they can't afford to keep renting it. They have to sell it. And a lot of people are in that situation here in New Orleans.
Yeah, and just for perspective, guys, that's a really tight position for a homeowner to be in, because if a homeowner is renting the house out and they're still losing money, they got to get out from up under it. And so
Right.
they kind of gave you a relatively short notice that you had to make some changes, huh?
And so the situation, if you want me, listen, we're real people, and it was a real situation that we were in.
Yeah.
We don't have credit. So therefore, when you buy the church with cash, and you buy the properties with cash, you buy your vehicles, or you buy your trailers and different things like that, and you don't use credit, that's horrible. That's horrible. You don't, like, you have a number, but it doesn't reflect who you really are.
Right.
So my situation, I'm in the 550 range because I don't use it.
I think my
I'm
credit
not
score,
embarrassed for it.
I think my credit score is 18. I don't know.
No.
It's low.
But literally, the realtor told us that we couldn't buy and we couldn't rent, because in this market, you have to have just as high of a credit score to rent as you do to purchase.
Sure do.
Which no sense.
Right.
But that's the way it works. And so she said, I don't want to have to see you live in your trailer again, the little travel trailer that God blessed us with. But I don't see a way right now. So I was looking and we were praying. We actually kind of thought maybe God was done with us here. Maybe God just wanted us to be the Noah and build the ark and let somebody else take it. We didn't know what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
But God, we found this house. It was owner finance. I didn't understand what that meant, because we've never bought a home ever. We've always rented. And so they reached out, found out the terms. The miracle is really, it's still really showing itself how great it is that God did it. And so basically, our mortgage is the same exact price as the mortgage she has. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a blessing. No additional interest on top of it. Okay. The closing was no cost to us. Okay.
Yep.
What else did we have? The down payment. That was a miracle in and of itself. We didn't know how we were going to get it, but so the Lord told me to keep my meeting yesterday with somebody, and instead of clearing my schedule for the closing yesterday. And I was in a war with myself, but I wanted to follow the Lord. I went and I met with this woman that it's a business owner, and she said, when I met you that day, I felt like it was a divine intervention, and I want to know what's going on with the housing situation. Well, I was meeting with her for a different topic of a personal situation she's going through. And so I said, well, and I'm trying to do like pastors do. We reroute your question, why we're really. I said, well, I'm not really here for that right now, but I'm here to see how you're doing. And she said, answer a few more of my questions. And then she said, no, I feel like I'm here for something else. So tell me exactly what's going on with the house. Did you even find a house? And so we began to tell her what was going on in that situation. She said, and that's what I felt that I needed to do for you today. So she gave a large portion of our down payment. And then while that meeting's going on, a missionary, I can't tell you exactly where they're at, but because they're in an undisclosed area, but a missionary in Africa was praying with their husband for us that yesterday morning. The Lord spoke to them, not knowing our situation, because they are in Africa, right?
Right.
She texts me and she says, how's the house going? Because she knew we were looking for a house. Everybody knew we were looking for a house. I told her, well, we're supposed to close today, but I don't know how things are going to work out. She said, well, the Lord spoke to my husband and I and told us to give you this amount of money. Now they're praying in Africa and God gives them a number. It literally got us almost everything we needed. Right. Almost.
Wow.
Oh, right. So, we were thankful that, there were some other people that came forward and said, no, we will help you as well. And so God just did what God does. So today we closed on it. If you look it up on Redfin, I was happy when it said sold today.
Yep. I just shared the picture to all those who can see us live. I shared the picture of the whole family on the porch, and an amazing story. One other thing, because you guys know we're gonna run out of time, so I got to get to this. One other thing that the church that in Noah does is you guys pick people up for church. And your transportation is important because there are some people who want to come to church who simply just can't. And let me just lay the background for you, because I know that they will do it better than me, but I want you guys to understand the setup. They have been using their church van to pick people up, and the church van is just simply on its last legs.
Yeah.
Right.
Like down on us today.
It broke down on them today. And so a pastor in a community where God called them, pastors in a community where many people would not stay, many people would not go. Pastor McKee didn't tell you, but he's been shot at the property.
That's true.
That's true.
Hasn't been shot in front of the church.
That's not good.
He's not, you know what I mean? It is just you got to be called, and you got to be, but then the other piece is you got to be chosen too. Let me preach for a minute, and you can take up an offering. You got to be called, but you also got to be chosen. And these people are chosen to be in this time, in this season, and in this city. And so they're trying to get people back and forth to church, and it's a struggle. So enter in the faith bus.
Yes.
Right? Tell us about the faith bus.
So the van broke down at a church event like 2 hours away. This is a couple months ago. And my husband was pretty stressed out about it. He called a friend of his and said, listen, I just need you to pray for me right now because I don't know how I'm going to get home. And so two of them prayed, evangelists, and they just prayed God what to do. And so the man of God told him, listen, I really feel like in the Lord that the Lord would like you, that the Lord would want you to put up this GoFundMe. Now the faith bus thing hadn't come around yet. So just put up a GoFundMe. And I was like, oh my goodness, I really don't want to be those people. And so we didn't that day. That was a Saturday. Monday morning in prayer, the Lord said, people sell church chairs all the time when they want to put the new chairs in their church. Look up cartoon bus on Google. And the Lord speaks to me that way. I looked up cartoon bus on Google, and if you do the same, you'll find it. You'll see that little picture that I have, and it had faith bus. And I said, oh my goodness. He said, tell them to take a seat on the faith bus. And so that's how we got there. And we've got 191 seats already taken. We decided to get a bus that was, somebody donated a bus to us that only has 60,000 miles on it, but it has not run in 3 years. They said, maybe if you look at it, you might could get it running. It would be worth a shot. So we got somebody to finally agree to look at it, professional last week. And we're starting that process of trying to, it's going to cost. and likely what we think is wrong with it. There will be that and some more as you dig into these type of situations.
And it's an actual bus.
It is.
Well, it's a 15-passenger van,
Okay.
but that would prevent us from making 2 trips on Sunday.
Right.
We could pick up everybody in one go. And again, it needs some work. We don't know everything that's wrong with it, but we're anticipating a good amount of stuff.
Right.
But it's only got 60,000 miles on it, and it was owned by one church.
Well,
So
now tell us this, y'all. If it's the faith bus, they buy a seat. How's that work? How do people participate?
So they the seats, we have 400 seats at $40. Some people have said, I can only do $10, I can only do $20, or I'm going to give $100. And so we basically equate it, but more people than not will just donate the amount of the seat, which is $40. They'll do CashApp, Venmo, or PayPal. And that gets into a collective pile to be used for that project. That's a lot of the ways that Noah works, is people can choose a project to be involved with. So they may not want to be involved with the faith bus, but they want to be involved with the toilets, or they want to be involved with this or that or the other. And so that's what's going on right now. Like I said, we have 191 seats. So we're really close.
Yeah, you're almost at 200. And if people would like to participate in buying a seat on the faith bus, what's the handle so we can give them the actual information?
Can do CashApp is NO for New Orleans, and then $NO, and then it's apostolic spelled out, Haven spelled out. And it's the same handle on Venmo, just with the @ on Venmo. And then on our PayPal, we have a donate button that they can use.
Okay, and where's the PayPal? How do they find you on PayPal? Same thing?
The PayPal is actually the church name, New Orleans Apostolic Haven @Gmail.
Okay.
That's our
New Orleans Apostolic Haven @Gmail for PayPal. It's also NO Apostolic Haven on Venmo.
Yes.
And it's NO Apostolic Haven $ NO Apostolic Haven for CashApp. So if you would like to help these pastors who are in the throes of revival and God is moving, I want to show you guys this real quick. If I can get to it real quick, y'all. You did have the church dedication, correct, in March?
We did. So we still don't have our electric on yet, but they said that they were going to do a scheduled outage tomorrow to try to do put in the 3-phase. That won't give us power, but it'll get us very, very close. We're already tied into the transformers and everything. So hopefully, sooner rather than later, we'll have air conditioning in that building.
Yeah, so here it is on the screen, ladies and gentlemen. This is when I met these folks, this building was completely empty. You can see it on the screen there. And now the work and the labor and the dedication and the commitment of Pastor and Sister McKee, as well as many others throughout the New Orleans area and throughout the country, have been watching this work that started in a parking lot that moved to a tent that got destroyed, that got an upgraded tent to this. And I've been a part of building churches, and you guys put a lot of hours into this ministry, like an average amount of hours per week. Would you say, Pastor Phil, how much?
How many hours a week?
Well,
how many hours are in a week?
No. Truth is that at the highest point of it, I was clocking around 70 hours a week.
70 hours, and you have delivered a couple babies during this process, haven't
Right.
you?
So we had Nemo when we were under the tent. His first service ever was a tent service. And maybe that's why he's a little on the wild side.
Yeah.
And Tinny Faith was born at near completion of the building.
Right.
And so she
So when we had contractors in the building, being as my wife was the grant writer and things like that, she was the one that was on the job site, if you will,
Yeah.
for the whole day. For one, she has way more patience than I do, and I would have ran everybody off.
Yeah.
But
that was a part of the grant
Yeah.
situation as well.
And so I pretty much took care of the people.
Yes.
You know, I took care of the church people.
The
I
Bible
would-
studies, the house.
Bible studies, hospital visits,
Right.
you know, take people to the doctor and grocery stores, things of that nature. But I would always show up with lunch for all the employees, all the guys that were working. So
Greg says, my VP Greg says the book should be titled "The Parking Lot Church: Our Faith." Yeah.
Is titled "The Miracle on Benton Street."
right.
Oh, really? That's the street
Yeah.
your church is on?
Yeah.
Yes, it's the Miracle on Benton Street because it literally has been a miracle.
Yeah.
It has been. So you're writing the book, or is it finished?
She's
I
writing that
am
book.
writing.
That's the book that she's writing, and I'm writing a book called Church in the Hood,
Oh,
because where we're at, it's not the best area. We
Right.
think it's the best area,
Yeah,
but it's still in inner city New Orleans.
right.
And so there's no literature out there telling anybody how to start a church in an urban environment.
right.
You know, giving any kind of instructions, any kind of
And the truth is
advice,
that
you know.
you can reach.
Yeah.
I firmly believe anyone can go there and be successful
Right.
if they can master love.
It's love and respect. That's what
If
it's
they
all
can
about.
love them, then God can do it.
I feel that same way, y'all, because you know we go into the prison every month with our work here at Impact Life 24/7, and love
Yeah.
and respect gets you miles and miles and miles into people's hearts. And ladies and gentlemen, we're getting ready to wrap up. You know, I'm talking to preachers, so we can never finish on time. But that's right. But we got to work on our first closing. You know, the truth of the matter is that we get excited when football and basketball and baseball goes into extra time. So just give us a few more minutes. I really want to push this apostolic bus, the faith bus. And so if you would like to contribute to this, the $ NO Apostolic Haven is how you can buy a $40 seat on the faith bus, or on Venmo, it's the @NO Apostolic Haven. And of course, on PayPal, what was the PayPal? New Orleans Apostolic Haven?
Church's name, New
Yep.
Orleans Apostolic Haven @gmail.com.
New Orleans Apostolic Haven. Now listen, understand this, that Pastors McKee are doing this, building a church with 8 children, and all of them there's still 14 is the oldest. I told Pastor Jazzmine, I said, you know, my oldest son turns 30 this month, and she says, well, I'm 33. I'm like, what? and thank God for what his hand has demonstrated being upon you all, because we can always look at the excuses to quit, but you guys find every excuse to keep going. That's what I love. I love it. And God's hand is upon you.
What it comes down to is you just go on the last word God gave you. I mean, Noah didn't hear from God for 100 years.
Right.
He just went off the last word God gave him. And so until God tells us the next direction, we're just going to keep pushing forward for his kingdom. You know, we live by faith, not by sight. You know, we live for today and prepare for tomorrow. And so we trust God. We trust everything that he's involved with. We take the Bible literally, and we just love people.
A young lady commented on the live. She said, I can't even pronounce her name. Last name is Norman. She said, I have never met these people, but they have inspired me. I've tried to help all I can to help them with the van need. So your story, this is why I love that you live the story out loud. Don't let any of the religious folks tell you don't post great stuff. If God blesses y'all with $1 million seed, post it. so we can all run around the community.
We do that because we want people to know God did it for me and I'm nobody.
Right.
So definitely do it for you.
Right.
I take that back. Take that back immediately. You are somebody. You're God's child. And
But listen, that is the truth. If God can use us,
right.
and that's why we, if you will, live out loud.
Right.
And we tell the good, the bad, and the ugly. That's why we're sitting here.
Right.
We look frazzled and a mess because we're real people.
Right.
We go through real situations, and God still finds a way that we can be blessed to his kingdom.
One of the, I think it's important here. Tenny don't like me yet, so she cries. I think it's important for people to see pastors as real people.
Right.
Yeah.
We're not living this fancy lifestyle.
Right.
We go through hard times, we go through struggles, we go through trials, and maybe one day we can come back on and talk about the struggles.
Yeah. I want to bring you back for that, and I also want to bring you back about the point that you brought up about building a church in an urban community. I think the apostolic movement could use some teaching on that, because my wife and I's ministry has always been, when we come to a new city, we say, where's the projects? We go find them, because you know why? Because so many people won't go there.
Right. I told you at the beginning of the show, my testimony, where I come from. Come from the hood, raised in the ghetto. The church that I went to the first time was 2 miles away from my neighborhood, and we never got outreached.
Wow.
Nobody ever knocked on my door on a Saturday morning. Nobody. And I'm not discrediting that church at all.
Right.
What I'm saying is urban environments get looked over.
They do.
And I knew when God sent us to New Orleans, I knew where he was sending us.
Right.
And I said, okay, so we're going to the lower 9. We're going to the lower 9th ward,
right.
Which it feels like home. Those are my people.
And that's what God says. God, remember you talked about Moses you talked about Noah, but I'm thinking about when God was dealing with Moses, he said, them is your people, because God was ready to wipe them all out. He said, them is your people.
That's right.
Right.
Every chapter.
Brother, when you can go to a place and you call those people your people, that's the calling of God. So listen, we are 9 minutes over, and we could probably go another 3 or 4 hours, but then I'd have to give them an offering. Listen, I would love for you guys to join on the faith bus. Impacting Life 24/7 is going to participate with that, just so you know. We want to be a part, get a seat on the faith bus, and all of you that want to, I'll make sure that the Cash App and the Venmo is in the show notes. But Pastors Phillip and Jazzmine McKee and 8 children, they could have their own reality show. they are building a work for God, and we're so thankful that you guys have taken time out of your schedule. I know, raising an infant, I got an infant granddaughter here, so I know you got your hands full, but your kids, they're in the ministry, they're helping, they're singing, praise singing, loving God, and that's the way that you're raising them right. Thank God for the church. I would rather take my chances raising them in church than leaving them out in the world. I'm going to give the last word to Pastor McGee. I want you to talk to all those people out there in the lower 9th that's going to see this and come to your church Sunday morning.
Woohoo.
Well, I'm going to tell you something about Noah. I'll move a little closer.
Go ahead, brother.
Something about Noah is we love people and we love God.
Yeah.
We preach, we practice, and we believe it's not about a religion, it's about a relationship. Jesus never came here to give us religion. He came here to give us a relationship.
Right.
He came here to teach us to love each other, to respect each other, to be there for each other. And that's what we implement at Noah. We have the food pantry at Noah. We have we call it the storehouse. We have, we still cook for people. We have Tuesday night Bible studies in our home where we go pick up people. We've got homeless people that come to church. We've got wealthy people that will show up to church. So it's a great mixture of different people from different social classes, but everybody is treated as equals. Everybody that comes to this church, that comes to our home, they're treated just like we are, and it's an honor to serve the people of New Orleans. And I tell people, I'm not just the pastor in the lower 9, but I'm the pastor in New Orleans.
Yeah.
God called me to this city, not to the section of the city.
Go ahead, brother.
And so if you ask me how many people do we have in the church, I'll tell you 1.5 million. Most of them just hadn't figured it out yet.
That's right.
we love people. We love God. We love serving people. We love to be a blessing. So
Well,
I appreciate being on the show. It's a real honor.
Man, it's an honor always to have you. You guys get some of the highest ratings when you're on the show because y'all bring the faith. And
Well, glory to
like
God.
I said, Impacting Life 24/7 is going to participate in the faith bus. And we love you. I can't wait for us to talk collard greens this Thanksgiving.
Oh, man, I'm waiting on it.
He think he can cook collards better than CL.
There's no thinking about it. There's no thinking.
Well, man, I love you, Pastor McKee, and we'll keep
Love
you,
you, man.
McKee. We'll keep you in our prayers. If you need
Yes,
anything
sir.
else from us, this platform is always open to you. Okay, sir?
Appreciate that, my brother.
All right. I
Love
hope you
y'all. Appreciate you guys, and I pray that somebody's blessed by it.
hug all those kids, bro.
Yes, sir.
All right. Take care.
Yeah.
So that's it, ladies and gentlemen. We are done. Canned collards. Greg, we don't do canned collards, brother. We are done. Wasn't that fun, Greg? Back-to-back shows. That was cool. I'm not in shape to do it all the time, but it was really great. Dr. Dunlap laid the foundation of possessions, resources, and finances. And then Pastor and Sister McKee elevated our faith down there at Noah. And for you, Greg, you get to go to bed now. All right. So thank you guys for tuning in to Impact Life 24/7. We are just flexing with the show because Greg, I thought our schedule was going to slow down in the summer, but in fact, it picked back up even after Greg canceled our calendar in June because of my illness. God has just opened up so many doors, back-to-back events. And so we just are trying to do the show when we can and be a blessing and an impact to those that will listen. So until next time, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to Impacting Life 24/7 with your host, CL King and Greg Smith, the VP. Take care.